Okay, welcome back to the Mental Toughness Podcast.org. I'm Steve Siebold, your host, and today I want to talk about the concept that breaks down maybe more performance psychologically, emotionally than anything else I've ever seen in all the years that, I've been doing this. And that's emotional overwhelm. It's when a performer in business, sports, personally, in a relationship, just a person in general dealing with the world, trying to survive, trying to stay happy and fulfilled and all those things, becomes emotionally overwhelmed to the point where things break down. And it happens all the time, especially to people that don't understand the concept, but even people that do understand the concept. I mean, I've been dealing with this for a lot of years, and it still happens to me sometimes. I see it pretty quickly, but I fall into the trap easily as well because it's easy to fall into, especially right now. Well, let me explain the concept first. So obviously, the idea of emotional overwhelm is you become overwhelmed with emotion. Why? Because you're thinking of too many things at the same time. So, for example, right now, just a macro example would be what's going on in the world. Okay, well, let's look at it. Well, we just came out of a 2-year shutdown with COVID, right? Let's just say, for example, the whole world's going to shut down. I mean, the whole world is going to stop. If you'd have told any of us this before COVID, we'd go, that cannot happen. There's no way that's going to happen. That's science fiction. Well, as we know, it did happen. And it's still partially influencing what's going on in the world. I mean, COVID didn't actually go away. We all wanted it to go away because we're all so sick of it, including me. I had it twice. And even people that didn't have it, like my wife, she never got it. But, she's sick of it like everybody else is, even though luckily she didn't get it. But we're all tired of talking about it. We're all tired about dealing with it. We're all tired of masks. And, it's almost like we're all pretending it doesn't exist because it's just you got to go on with your life at some point. And I mean, I'm right with everyone else in that category. But, let's just say, okay, that's one thing. We're still dealing with COVID. There's another spike going on supposedly right now. And, should you get the vaccine? Should you not get the vaccine? That's a whole thing. And all the stuff that that I know, because everyone in the world has had to deal with this, this spared no one. All right. Now you got the economy. Well, the economy worldwide has got, all kinds of issues, supply chain issues. We got inflation issues like we haven't had in a long time. Who's to blame for it? Well, the politicians like to go back and forth and who knows. But, certainly we have war in Europe. There's a nuclear threat. New York just yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, but yesterday, New York put out a public service announcement on what to do in the event of a nuclear strike on New York City. Now, I don't know, depending on your age, I'm 57, so I grew up in the time in the late 60s in school in the 70s where we did drills. We did drills with the duck cover and duck dive and cover or something like that. Basically, you went under your desk at school. Like, that's going to make a difference if you're in a nuclear war. Like, you're dead. Okay, it's over. But in case you happen to survive, it won't be for long. Okay, because the radiation will kill you eventually. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But okay, let's say you did get lucky and you went under your desk. I'm not sure why we went under our desk. It was because back then, if you're too young to remember, back then the threat was, maybe it's still the same threat. It was Russia. Russia was going to attack us with a nuclear weapon. We were told that all the time as little kids. So me and my friends never figured we'd ever grow up because we thought we were going to die in a nuclear war, which is really bizarre looking back on it. But now Russia has threatened again to use nuclear weapons, with the whole Ukraine situation. And so now people are actually talking about to the point where New York does a public service announcement. I think that might have been a little premature. I mean, why get people all fired up? I mean, if the nuclear bomb hits New York City, I don't think ducking under what they said to do is wash your hands, make sure you're clean, make sure your skin is clean. If you have whatever clothes you have on, take those clothes off, put them in a bag, get new clothes on, take a shower. Okay, I'm not sure how sound of advice that is, but I guess some of the experts said, yeah, that's technically, if you're still alive, that's what you would do. Okay. All right. Well, all right. I won't go there because the topic is emotional overwhelm. But so now we're thinking about COVID. We're thinking about the economy. We're thinking about inflation. We're thinking about gas prices. We're thinking about the possibility of being eliminated or at least destroyed at some level with a nuclear bomb or nuclear bombs hitting. But Russia has actually threatened us with, which would be the dumbest thing in the world because it would end the world effectively. If you've ever studied nuclear war at any level, and I have just as an outsider, not like as an expert, but just someone that's done some research on it over the years. Basically a fog, a cloud cover for the people that are left just covers the earth, which means there's no sun, which means there's no growth, which means there's no photosynthesis. Okay, go on and on, right? So eventually, it does not end well. Let's say it that way. You're probably better off getting hit right away and just leaving, than going through the torture of surviving it. But that said, okay, that good news said, it's on people's minds to some degree. It's on my mind to some degree. How can it not be, right? Hopefully this won't happen. It's probably a long shot anyway, but it's another brick in the wall, to quote the great band Pink Floyd. Okay, it's another thing to think about. So what happens is I'm thinking about all these things. Now maybe I have a personal problem. Maybe I have a health problem. Maybe I have another issue. And I'm thinking about 18 different things at one time that are weighing on my mind emotionally. And the result is performance breakdown. If I'm an athlete, like I was a tennis player, okay, and I'm thinking about, okay, it's 4-4 in the third set. I'm playing 2 out of 3 sets, so it's 4-4. If I win this point and then I win another point, then I hold my serve at 5-4. Then I break at 5-4, at 4-4, and then I break at 5-4. I can win the match 6-4. But if I lose my serve, if I'm thinking too many points ahead, what's the result? Breakdown, performance breakdown. And of course, athletes are trained in tennis to play 1 point at a time. If I had a nickel for every time a coach told me that in all the years I trained, I would be rich. I mean, but it's really good advice. 1 point at a time, 1 point at a time, 1 day at a time. What do they say in Alcoholics Anonymous to people? They say you take it 1 day at a time, your sobriety 1 day at a time, because people get overwhelmed. They think, my God, I can't ever have a drink. Someone that's been addicted to alcohol, I can never have a drink the rest of my life. I mean, I might live 50 more years and I can't ever have a drink. Oh my God, there's no way I could do that. What happens? Performance breakdown. Boom, I got the bottle open and it's half gone because I'm overwhelmed, right? But if they say, well, 1 day at a time, well, that's a form, because now the person focuses on 1 day at a time. And from what some of my friends in Alcoholics Anonymous have said, when they're really severely addicted to alcohol, they're severe, alcoholics, they'll say, hey, look, if it's got to be 1 hour at a time, then it's got to be 1 hour at a time. That's the opposite of emotional overwhelm. What you're doing is you're breaking it down into bite-sized pieces so it's palatable. So you think, well, I could do an hour. I can't do a day, but I could do an hour. I could do a day, but I can't do a week. I could do a week, but I can't do a year, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to break it down. So if you find yourself, the point of this whole thing is if you find yourself becoming emotionally overwhelmed, so I got this, I got that, I got this, I got that, I got this, I got that, the stress level goes through the roof and your performance will shut down to the point where you become, at some level, to use a metaphor, a deer in the proverbial headlights. You just freeze because you don't know whether to go left, right, up, or down. You're frozen because there's so many options, too many options to perform. So you don't. You just stop. You freeze. And of course, as a performer at any level, whether you're a business person or you're an athlete or anything else, that's the worst thing you can possibly do. It's like in a relationship, if you want to parallel to relationships, it's when, let's say, a couple that's married or a couple that's living together, and they stop. They're so overwhelmed with the number of problems and conflicts between the two people, they stop talking because it's too much. Well, that's the worst thing that can possibly happen. You're better off having a couple fighting viciously with each other, maybe even throwing plates at each other. Hopefully not anything beyond that, but at least expressing their anger or their whatever it is that they're feeling, as opposed to shutting down. Once relationships shut down, communication shuts down, it gets really bad. Okay, now all the communication is one-sided and it's internal. And what happens? You start making things up. You start making things up. If I said this, she would say that. If I said this, he would say that. And you start making things up, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, and it metastasizes. And all of a sudden, the people are divorced, or the people never talk to each other again, or whatever it is. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Relationships, sports, business, etc. And for entrepreneurs, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs are into mental toughness, and that's, of course, the world I've come from and the world I'm in, and every day, and a lot of you guys are as well. It's critical that we learn this. It's critical that we get good at it. Doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. I mean, I teach this stuff and I still fall into it, but I think the difference is when I fall into it, I know I'm in it. I mean, I don't guess why I feel strange or I'm not performing at the top of my game. I'm not performing because I'm overwhelmed. And I've done it to myself because it's really something you do to yourself because it's based on your thinking. So I'm thinking of, I got this, I got that, I got this, I got this, I got this, I got that. And all of a sudden I'm so overwhelmed that I can't perform. And so let's just talk about the antidote at the end of the day. And again, Alcoholics Anonymous, tennis coaches, golf coaches, one shot at a time. One putt at a time, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time. You take it and break it down to bite-sized pieces. So emotionally speaking, it's something you can deal with. 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time if you have to. And breathe. Breathe. And recognize that it's all going to be okay. You will get through this. Everything that seems so dramatic, usually in life or in business and sports, whatever it is, it will turn. It will pass, you know. It will pass. It eventually, one way or the other, you know, like the nuclear thing. Hey, look, if Putin's going to bomb us straight on, it's going to pass because we're going to be gone and then it'll be over and we won't have to worry about it. And let's hope that doesn't happen. But, you know, one way or another, these things go by and then other things come up, just like in life in general, right? So if you're looking at yourself as a performer, say, how do I avoid becoming emotionally overwhelmed? The enemy of performance, of high performance especially. 1 day at a time, one task at a time. It's like, you know, I wake up every day and usually at night I'll do my to-do list kind of a thing. And I'll write down all these different things. And then I wake up the next morning early, and while I'm eating breakfast, I'll be writing down the rest of the ones I forgot that night. And it's a lot of stuff, like everybody else, like as an entrepreneur, especially with a small staff, you know, because I don't like having a large staff because I've had them and I didn't like them. It's too much work. And so I do a lot of things that I could hire out or I used to hire out. So there's a lot of little tasks, you know, a lot of little stuff that a lot of entrepreneurs at my level don't do because they have other people doing them. And I'm doing them because I'd rather do it that way. But there's a lot of little things. So how do you not become overwhelmed? Well, I made that mistake as well. But one task at a time. One task at a time. Preferably the most difficult task first. The second most difficult task second. The third most difficult task third. As my great friend, old friend for many years, Brian Tracy likes to say, eat the frog first. Do the ugliest thing on your list, the hardest thing on your list, the most stressful thing on your list, whatever it is, the hardest thing or the most important thing first. Eat the frog. No one wants to eat the frog, but if you eat the frog first, everything you eat after that is easy. And that's why Brian says that. And Brian's one of the smartest guys in personal development. I've really enjoyed. He was on our board for 20 years. Great guy, smart guy. Brian. I mean, if you haven't bought a Brian Tracy book or all his books, you want to look into it because he's written some great books. My favorite Brian Tracy book is not his most popular, but it's my favorite. It's called Focal Point. Focal Point. I've told Brian so many times, I love that book. I love that book, Focal Point. All his books are good. But, you know, Brian talks about this, and he's absolutely right. He really is. He's a very pragmatic guy and a very pragmatic writer as well, and a very good one. And, he talks about this concept. It's really important. It's a big part of mental toughness is being able to break things down, especially under pressure. Especially when it really counts. I can tell you the times I was best under pressure is when it was really tight in a tennis match going back many years when it was like, a 9-point tiebreaker, which is the old tiebreaker system they used to use. They don't use it anymore, but it used to be the first person to 5 points. So sometimes you'd get to 4-4. 1 point wins a match after 3 or 4 hours. 1 point. And that's the most quiet and calm I have ever been in my life during all those times. And I did it, dozens and dozens of times. I played 4-4 tiebreakers, and I don't know what my record was. I suppose I was probably about 50-50, I guess. But I just remember the mentality of it, which was calm, absolute calm. Because if you're uptight at all, you're dead. You've got to really think and really breathe and stay very, very calm and do the best you can with a calm mental attitude, because any little tension will throw you off. It's like a putt, a short putt that you can make. Calm, very, very calm. You can make the putt. Don't overthink it. Relax, stay calm, breathe, and put the ball in the hole. Don't overthink it. It's easy to say and hard to do, but you do get good at it. It is a skill you get good at. So think about this. Think about how you can break things down. And when you fall into emotional overwhelm, tell yourself one step at a time, one thing at a time, one problem at a time. Stop trying to tackle 3 problems at one time. And we all do it. I've done it. I'm not saying, it's easy to fall into. But I'll take one problem at a time. Okay, that other problem, believe me, those other problems, they will be there for you when you're ready. But don't try to solve them all at once, because that's when performance breaks down. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate, again, you listen to the podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast if you're so inclined. We do this once a week, and I try not to go too long, but not too short to make sure that you get a little time in here, but not too far where, not too long where you're falling asleep. Hopefully not. But subscribe at mentaltoughness.podcast.org. I couldn't get .com. So it's mentaltoughness.podcast.org. Subscribe. We'll send you an email every week with the podcast. You can watch it. We videotape. You can watch it. You can listen to it, or both. But with that, I appreciate you listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.